Hello everyone, welcome to another Dreams tutorial. My name is Martin Nebelong and today I'll be taking you through the process of sculpting a male portrait in Dreams. A lot of the techniques that I use in this process will be of a more general nature, so they can be used for both male or female sculpts. They can be used for animals, scenery or anything really. So one of the main things I would say about Dreams is it's very important to play and have fun, and don't be afraid to experiment with weird things, weird techniques, as I find that, contrary to a lot of traditional 3D programs, you can actually have a lot of happy accidents in Dreams in a way, where most 3D programs that I've used before require more planning and more careful consideration during the process. And this is actually I think one of the biggest strengths of Dreams is the fact that, the process is just plain fun really. No matter what I'm doing in Dreams, I always have this sense of wonder and this sense of anything is possible. And this is a fantastic experience and very motivating, I think, for any creative persons out there. So as you can tell here, I've started laying down the basic shape of the character, and I'm using the cylinder tool for this, set to smear mode. I actually use stamp mode most often, but for a more sketch-like process like this, I like the smear tool. Here I've switched over to a sphere, set to stamp mode, and with a bit of soft blend to start and refine the shape of the face a little bit. As you're watching this tutorial, please do remember that I've been drawing and painting for all of my life. I'm 37 years old now, and I've been working professionally for close to 17 years, I think. One of my early professional jobs was actually at an amusement park in Copenhagen, where I would sit and draw portraits of the guests of the park. So I have many years of experience painting, drawing and sculpting the human face. So if you find that you're struggling with this in Dreams, one of the best tips I can actually give you is to go back to the basics. Do your figure drawings on paper with a pencil. Use reference in Dreams, very important. And generally just, don't expect to be able to perfectly sculpt something as complex as human anatomy without actually putting in the hours that it takes to learn this stuff. That being said, I would say don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to tackle topics that are beyond the scope of what you'd normally do. I think you'll be surprised just how far you can actually get in Dreams once you get a good grasp of the tools here. Here I'm using the sphere tool set to subtract, stamp mode with a bit of soft blend to sculpt out the eye sockets of the character. So as I'm placing my move controllers here, I'm constantly dialing up or down on the soft blend until I get an effect that I like. Alright, so I switched to the cone, set to subtract, and I'm then laying in the mouth here, and it looks quite ridiculous at the moment, but don't worry. Hopefully this will turn out just right anyways. I find that it's a good idea to sculpt out the cavity of the mouth, as I'm doing here, and then you can sculpt the lips of the character afterwards. So it looks pretty stupid at the moment, but don't worry, in a minute it should look okay. So here you can tell that I'm actually moving the shapes around after the fact, after I've sculpted them, and this is really a godsend, I would say, in terms of character design, as the placement of the mouth, for instance, it changes the character a lot, I would say. And as long as you're keeping the sculpt to rather basic shapes, you can still move things around quite easily. Of course, once you go in and make stuff like lips that I'm doing here, you won't be able to as easily move things around. So this is one of the big drawbacks to sculpting in Dreams compared to other 3D programs, is the fact that you cannot deform a sculpt after you've made it. You can only go in and move the individual elements of the sculpt. So before you start to refine a character, you should be quite sure that this is actually the look that you're going for. I've had multiple sculpts where I had to start over on things like, for instance, the lower part of the face here. I would then go in with just take a big subtractive sphere and then cut away all of the lower part of the face and build it up again from the ground. But obviously this takes quite some time, so it's better to start off with the big shapes, make sure that everything is as you want it to, and then you can go in and refine stuff afterwards. Okay, so I'm using the cone as a way to cut into the model. You can see here what happens when I turn up the soft blend. It gives this very nice kind of crease to your model, and I'm actually using the cone a lot for this. So what you do is you just up the soft blend, and then you hold your hand a bit away from the sculpt, and it actually cuts into the model in a very nice sculptural way. And this is, I would say, this is one of my main tools actually when sculpting characters. Next up, I'll be sculpting the eyelids of the character, and I use the sphere tool set to sections for this. And you can change the sections through the modify shape menu in Dreams, and then using a bit of soft blend as well to make the eyelid kind of grow together with the surrounding face. And as you can tell, I've actually turned off the mirror mode for this, and this is because if you look at a human face, nobody has a completely symmetrical face, and if you keep symmetry on or mirror mode on for the full duration of your sculpt, you'll end up with a very artificial looking character. So it's important during the process to turn off mirror mode now and then. Alright, I scoped out of the face sculpt, and I'm then making the eyes here. I'm using the live clone on the eye and flipping the clone. This way, by using live clone, I know that any changes that I make to either of the clones will be reflected in the other one in real time, as long as you only have 2 copies. You can see on the other side that the changes that I make are actually reflected in real time. As soon as you have more than 2 live clones, you won't get live updates on all of the clones, but as soon as you finish your sculpting action, the change will then be updated across all of the live clones. And it's actually a lot of fun to build up a whole scene using live clones and then refine the elements and see all of these changes reflected in the whole scene. So I scoped into the face again, and I'm building up the nose here using a elongated sphere. I'm sculpting in the nostrils, using soft blend to smoothen the transition between the bridge of the nose and the cheeks. I'm then using a flat sphere to go in and further refine the area around the mouth and the cheeks. And there it is again, the cone with soft blend used to make these very, very nice creases on the model. And it's great for stuff like wrinkles. It's great for more clean cuts if you turn down the soft blend. And as you can see here underneath the eyes, I can use it as well to get these wrinkles where the skin would fold. You can also use it to cut away larger portions of the model. So I find that this is a very versatile tool for sculpting anatomy, actually. I'm adding in a spotlight now to better be able to understand the shape. I find that the default lighting in Dreams is nice for the initial sculpting phase, but you know, to get a better sense of what you're actually doing, it can help you a lot to place some lights around your model. So especially for areas like underneath the chin here, it's very difficult to see what's actually going on without adding in some custom lights. And actually often when I'm sculpting scenes, I will start out by setting the light sources in my scene, setting the lighting, as I tend to get pretty inspired by actually sculpting in the actual environment that my model will be in. I'm changing the shape of the eye here, the area around the eye socket. As I saw the model from the side, I noticed that it looked a little bit strange, and this underlines the importance of all the time rotating your model, looking at it from different angles, because what looks great from one side might not look good from another side. And actually a quick tip here, you can use the live clone function to clone your model and then have multiple versions of the same sculpt next to each other. You can then rotate these so you actually get all of the angles at the same time while sculpting on your main model. This is a very useful tip. For the ears of the model, we're using a sphere that's been squashed down to this very thin version of the sphere. And I'm using that to make the main shape of the ear along with the backside here. What you saw me doing there was actually stamping down a single shape and then cloning that internally in the model to get the full shape of the backside of the ear. I'm then using a subtractive sphere to go in and make the actual shape of the ear. And again, I cannot stress this enough. It's super important that you're using reference for stuff like this. Unless you actually are among the lucky few who have photographic memory. If you do that, good for you. Otherwise, go on Google, search for ears, or even better, maybe have a mirror next to your monitor, and you know, use yourself for reference when you're sculpting. I'm not saying you want all of your characters to look like yourself, but it's a big help when you need to sculpt expressions and stuff, that you can actually sit and act out the emotions of your character. I remember I had this office space in Copenhagen some years ago, where we had all these cartoonists and illustrators, and all of them basically would have mirrors next to their monitors. And you would then at the office actually see people acting out different emotions and stuff. Could get quite interesting. So I'm using the cone set to soft blend to refine the creases of the ear. and more general refinement of the face, going in, adding wrinkles, changing the shape with soft blended spheres, and again here you see the power of the cone tool used to go in to the area between the brow and the upper eyelid, going and refining stuff there. And if you find it difficult to get to the area where you want the creases to be, you can actually squash the cone down to a very thin shape and still get the same effect without accidentally cutting into areas you don't want to change. Okay, it's time for us to give this character a nice hairdo. And there's multiple ways to do this in Dreams. Sometimes you want to sculpt the hair using the clay tools. In this case, I'm using paint mode. I'm turning on the draw flex tool, using the standard fleck, turning on in the guides. I'm turning on the tentacle snap. And what tentacle snap will do is actually snap to whatever surface is underneath your cursor when you start the stroke, and then after that you are free to draw as you please. So it's super useful for stuff like branches, stuff like individual hair strands that I'm doing here. And I'm actually just starting with the hair of the character here, drawing in each individual strand. Then I'm live cloning the full model. As I also mentioned before, you can use live clone to get a real-time preview of what your model looks like from various angles. And in the case of the hair, I'm actually going to be using it to get a live updated version of the hair strands with a little bit of duplicates. So this looks pretty crazy now, but if you lower the spread and up the amount of copies, you get this very nice soft, more thick hair without actually having to draw thousands of hair strands. So you basically kind of just draw in these guide hairs, and once you've done that, the program will then automatically make sure to fill out the space between the hairs. So you see here, when I'm scoped into the painting, I don't see the duplicates, but I do see them on the live updated live clone next to my drawing. So this is actually super helpful in getting an idea of what the finished painting will look like. And again, be sure to use reference for your drawing. Look at actually hairdos online. Make sure to give the hair a natural flow on the model. Don't just randomly scribble in hairs, as that will end up looking pretty weird. So you can see I have a very clear direction for the hairs here. They follow all follow a specific direction, flowing down in a natural manner. And this is something that takes a little bit of time, but it's actually very fast compared to any other way that I've tried and made hair in 3D programs previously. I know a lot of other tools use this concept of making some guide strands and then filling in the spaces between them, but it's a very free-flowing process in Dreams, and it's a lot of fun actually. Alright, so another very useful tip in paint mode is that you can draw a line. You can then scope out of your painting tool, and you can then clone within the painting, as you saw me doing here. So you scope out of the paint tool without exiting your painting, and you then, as you would do normally, you can then clone individual strokes in your painting. Once you're happy with the hair, you can go into the painting coat properties and you can add some shininess, maybe a bit of metalness or waxiness to the hair. You can go into the fleck properties and play around with the ruffle, impasto or looseness setting here to get the hair a more thick look. I'm also going into the duplicates options, changing the spread a little bit, playing around with the settings in general just until I get something that I like for the model. Alright, and that leads us to the fun part of the character sculpt here, actually painting the model. So I scope into the face sculpt, I select the paintbrush tool and I select a sphere to paint with. I then open the color wheel. You can do this if you have move controllers by bumping the top of the right controller against the bottom of the left one, or if you are on a DualShock controller, you can go into the color tools and select the color wheel there. Once we do that, it's just a matter of finding colors that you like for the model. Remember to turn off mirror mode, and then go in, add a little bit of redness to the cheeks and the nose, a little bit to the lips and so on. And again, use reference for this, as it will help you a lot in getting a more believable look for your character. And this is actually a very nostalgic process. It takes me right back to being a child, sitting in my room painting Warhammer figurines all day long, without knowing it, actually already back then, training and preparing for dreams. Alright, so all the while I'm doing this, I'm making sure to zoom in and out to look at the model from the distance. And you could actually just use a live clone here. You could clone the face and make a small copy next to the large one you're working on. Just again to make sure that your model reads well from different distances, from different angles and so on. So I'm drawing in some dark areas around the mouth of the character, around the cheek. And now I'm going in and changing the surface properties of the eyes to make them more reflective. You can also see that I actually made a small subtraction in the eye around where the iris would be, and I'm then using add mode in sculpt mode to stamp in a dark blue shape here for the iris of the eye. And again, if you look at a real human eye, you will see that it's not completely round. So make sure in dreams not to make the eye completely round either, as this will come off as looking a little bit fake. I'm then using a lighter blue tone here set to soft blend to give this nice effect with the dark ring around the iris. Now I'm taking a black sphere, I'm adding that as the pupil of the eye, setting it to subtract, as this will give a nice specular reflection. Alright, I scope out of the sculpt, I select paint mode, I go into guides and I enable the surface snap. I then select the draw flex, which will give you a line without opacity changes that also reacts to pressure sensitivity and makes the brush stroke broader or more narrow, depending on how hard you squeeze the trigger of your DualShock or your Move controller. And I'm then drawing in the eyebrows here, again making sure to make the flow of the hairs consistent. I manually draw in the other side as well. You could have just made a mirrored copy here, but again, you should try and avoid too symmetric looking faces. So it's a good idea to do manual stuff like this as well. I go into the painting duplicates menu, change the spread to a very low value. I add a little bit of scale, jitter, lower the amount of copies, and generally you can just play around with the settings until you get something that you like. I zoom out a little bit to look at the sculpt from the distance to make sure everything reads well. Using Surface Snap again, I go in and I draw a dark line around the eyes where the eye lashes would be. Alright, I'm just about satisfied with the look of the model now, so what this sculpt now severely lacks is interesting lighting, and I think actually lighting is the most important thing in Dreams. It can really make or break your model, and it's not enough to just, plunk in a sun and sky gadget and then think that that you're done here. It's great for some things, but most of the time you'll want to spice up your lighting a bit with spotlights or point lights as well. Just notice here what a difference it does that I actually made this spotlight here. It makes the lighting much more interesting, less flat and boring. So again, it helps a lot if you have an understanding of things like photography, or if you've been painting light and shadow before. But otherwise, I really recommend that you look at lighting in movies, as most movie lighting is done by professionals with a very good understanding of what light can do to the mood of a scene. So go ahead and download some screen grabs from your favorite movies. Look at what the lighting artists have done with the lights here, and maybe even try and recreate some of the lighting scenarios in these screen grabs. Here I'm using a sphere sculpt tool scoped into the face. I'm using that with surface snapping on to make these small imperfections in the skin, and it really adds a lot in terms of making the surface look more interesting. So I usually do this on my models, unless you're going for a very cartoony or a very artificial looking skin type. You'll want to make sure to add these imperfections, and here again make sure that mirror mode is turned off, as the viewer or anyone looking at your models will very quickly notice these mirrored patterns in the skin. I'm then switching over to the looseness tool while being scoped into the model. And I'm then adding a little bit of looseness to the area where the character would have his beard. So by adding looseness here, you can then go into the surface properties and change the inner fleck properties of your model, and get a very nice effect that you'll see in a minute. So as you can see here, by changing the color of the inner flex, you get this this very nice effect here without actually having to paint anything, and by just using the looseness tool. The looseness tool is actually a tool that I only started to use quite late in my dreams journey. It's great for making, if you're making a big field of grass, for instance, it's good for adding variation to the length of the grass and stuff like that. So be sure to experiment with the looseness tool as well. Alright everyone, that leads us to the conclusion of the tutorial. What you see here is the finished result after spending some time on adding some pre-existing assets I had lying around for the environment, the building in the background. I'm using some loose flex as well in the space around the character to give this interesting blue effect. I've also changed the light as well. And generally, again, as I'm always doing in dreams, I'm just playing around, having fun, and generally just being totally flabbergasted by the fact that this is even possible on a console, that I can today sit and do a lot of my professional freelance work as well in dreams is just absolutely amazing. And I really can't thank the guys at Media Molecule enough for giving us this fantastic tool, and also thanking you guys for being such a great community, for helping each other out with dreams questions, for encouraging me to do more work as well, and I really hope to do a lot more content like this in the future. I'm trying to organize my YouTube channel a bit more towards being an actual dreams hub of tips and tricks and everything. And as you see here in the background, I'm in love with the softblend tool. It's such an amazing function. And as you see in some of my other tutorials, you can get some very, very interesting effects by combining very quick detailed smears with soft blends on top of them. But that's a topic for another tutorial, and I hope to see you guys again soon. For now, I'm out of here, probably off to experiment more in dreams, hopefully finding some interesting tips and tricks that I can share with all of you. So have a good one, and I'll see you guys again very soon.